of the podcast.
That's right.
It's like that'll have to be some of the B-roll. Live from the chapel. And again, thank you for letting us come here. I think this is just the coolest place. It's interesting how many people haven't come down here at all.
Right.
And like Erin popped down here earlier because she's like, "Oh, can I help you out?" And so she came over here and she walked in and she's like, I thought it was this small. I'm like, "You've never been down here?" But I guess that's like part of, I work days and nights and I'm not always super busy. And sometimes I just wander the halls and I look around, or, sometimes if we're having a tough night, I'll just come down here for a minute and just, stand in silence for a while.
Yeah.
But I have found it interesting, how many people you'll find here at kind of unusual times.
Yeah, we have people that'll come in right at the beginning of shift or end of shift, and they'll come and kneel and say a quick prayer before their shift begins.
Yeah, I think I came in here at like 3 o'clock in the morning one time, and I didn't expect anyone in here, and I just kind of like walked in, and I was like, sorry.
Yeah.
So you're one of our hospital chaplains. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do here?
Absolutely. I'm Timothy Randolph. I've been a staff chaplain here at Cox for about 5 years, 4.5, something like that. Before that, I worked as a pastor in churches. But yeah, we have 6 staff, and then we have a residency program. So we have 4 day staff and then 2 night chaplains. And then we have a director over the whole program. And we have a supervisor who takes care of the residency program, the educational component, mentoring, one-on-one, things like that. And then we hire 8 residents each year. In fact, the residency program is starting next Monday. So that's why I was like, let's get this done this week, because next week is going to be chaos. And I'll be walking and hand-holding and doing a lot of stuff that the residents now are totally able to take care of everything in the hospital. But next week, everybody's going to be wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we're going to be showing them what it looks like to be a chaplain. So that's the one cool thing about here at Cox, is we are a training facility. We train chaplains that come from all walks of life. So.
Yeah. I definitely want to get down into that in a little bit. We were talking just a little bit ago about learning about different theology and practices and stuff, and I had no idea how intensive some of that training can be.
Yes.
It's and the seriousness with which it must be taken.
Yeah.
So you're a chaplain here. You were a pastor before. How long were you a pastor? What got you into that?
So in high school, I think I started to take my faith more seriously, and the church that I was attending with my family, the elders, the shepherds, the leaders of the congregation sat me down and asked, have you ever considered ministry as a calling? Which I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
A call, what is that? Just like, has the Lord placed this on your heart? And again, all of that was kind of foreign language to me, but I had a sense that this was what I was supposed to be doing, and I think that they were able to kind of breathe that into me a little bit and help me understand that ministry might be a path. So at the time, I grew up in Ohio, so I was going to go to Ohio State and go Buckeyes. And I was going to study high school history. I was going to be a history teacher. I liked history. I loved my history teacher. But honestly, I think I loved my history teacher because he was a minister in disguise. Like he just was a mentor, somebody that loved the Lord, and kind of gave us a space to do Bible studies and just kind of be ourselves. And I kind of wanted to do what he was doing, which I realized he was doing ministry. He was just being a history teacher who was ministering to us students. So once I kind of felt that sense of calling, that's when I transitioned from going to Ohio State to a private Christian school here actually in Searcy, Arkansas, which is not too far away. It's Harding University. It's a little Christian college. And from there, I went into youth ministry for about 8 years in Columbus, Georgia. And then I preached at a little congregation up in Wisconsin, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So I was there for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I started working with a spiritual director and doing a lot of stuff in hospitals. The congregation was aging. And again, it was one of those kind of moments where I sensed the Lord's kind of hand in things, where I felt like this may be what I'm supposed to do, working in a hospital, doing visits. Obviously, I had no idea exactly what chaplaincy was, but my spiritual director at the time, I asked him, I was like, well, what do you do for money? Because, I mean, obviously, I'm not paying you enough for this to be enough to take care of your family. And he told me, he's like, well, I'm a hospital chaplain. And he explained what that would look like. He talked about CPE, which we can talk more about. But the whole training, board certification, the process to get to here, he kind of planted the seed for that. And so we have family in this area. And so when we left Wisconsin, we were so far away from everybody. We wanted to relocate and be closer to family. And this was one of the hospitals that had a CPE program. And I was able to join that in 21. Mercy also has a program. But the timing for me to sync up, it just worked for me to come here. And glad I did, obviously.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier. I think it's so interesting, especially in retrospect, kind of the secret agents that are helping steer your life in ways.
Yeah.
You know, I had a teacher in high school who I'm sure my mom will watch this, but in my brain I was like, I don't think I can do this. I think I need to drop out. Like and I don't know what level of seriousness I had that in my head, but I just kind of felt hopeless in a way.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman I remember, he was my sociology maybe. One of those types of classes, and I just remember I'd mentioned it to him because he was kind of like a mentor figure to me. You know, he was one of the first people in my life who, recognized, the potential that I didn't see in myself. And I remember he put his hands on my shoulders and he whispered in my ear, he's like, if you drop out, I'm going to kick you. And then, said, I was like, okay. I won't do it.
I had a youth minister. I went through a spell of struggling and getting in trouble, and he sat me down. He's like, I just want to bash your head into concrete right now. I was like, I needed that though.
Yes.
Like I didn't need gentle. I needed a very firm approach, and it was like, you're right. What am I doing? You know?
Yeah.
Those were transitional moments.
It's interesting the things that can kind of shock the life into you sometimes. I think I've said the story on another podcast, but one of the probably the most influential person as far as my course and track in nursing and medicine was like my childhood pediatrician, who scared me so bad I cried like all day. She told me, and I'm still a big guy, but I was a plump child, and she was like, you're gonna have a heart attack, and I'm like, and my mom was furious, dragged me out of there, and she just not a fond memory for me, but she ended up being my like basic anatomy teacher, and I mean she was a hard charger, but she was one of those people who pulled me aside and was like, you need to do this. Yeah. And I didn't even realize who she was until one day I was talking to my mom about it. She was like, what's her name again? You know? And I told her, and she's like, oh boy, But yeah, I mean, there's always this mysterious figure. So you spend all this time in ministry, and then you're thinking about going into the hospital. What drew you into coming into the hospital?
Yeah. It is a bizarre thing, because I would tell people, I had maybe a thought that I would want to do like funeral direction, or just sitting and doing funerals, or sitting with the dying, were the times where I felt a sense of peace and feeling like this is where God has placed me, in a way that I didn't feel when I was in the pulpit preaching. Although there were components of that I definitely enjoyed. I enjoy the ministry of study. I enjoy the interrelational components of working as a pastor in a church. But there was something sacred, something holy about working in the midst of grief and near death and dying that, when I tell people that and they look at me like I'm insane, I'm like, well, that's probably not your calling,
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. That was just a sense in which I felt the Lord placed that on me. And then working up in Wisconsin, the congregation was older, and I just was a young baby preacher, just getting exposed to a lot of those things, being pushed into funerals and hospital visits early on, just because that was the ministry that was in front of me, and that was another component of thinking this might be a direction for me. Yeah.
It's interesting because I totally agree. Both myself and my wife, we have a big passion for palliative care and end of life care. I actually thought before I moved out here that when I went to NP school that I would be a palliative care nurse practitioner.
Yeah.
Not that that's still not potential.
I'm sure they'd love to have you.
I still have just a huge love for that. I think it is a very sacred space, right? That you are very privileged to enter into. And I think, I remember, I think I was going through a spurt where I was dealing with some burnout and stuff, and I just happened across an internet reel, which they're not good for much, but sometimes a message can pop out of there, And it was, I want to say, it was a physician who was kind of relaying his experience about a similar topic, feeling burnout, not necessarily knowing what to do, and some advice that he was given about, when essentially the advice was, if you don't know what to do, just pray for your patients. And he was just kind of like,
Yeah.
That's the answer, But he relayed the experience of when he started doing it, and it was like it completely changed his perspective. Like it totally, started humanizing a lot of these people, because so often we've talked about this on the podcast many times. We're locked in for war. We want to win, but sometimes that winning isn't what you think it looks like.
Yeah.
Not always.
That's a good way to say it.
But you had mentioned kind of the holiness, the sacredness of it, and I think, as like on like my personal journey, trying to understand and kind of put names to certain things, trying to understand the nature of divinity and holiness and sacred spaces. I think once you can start to define those terms, and then you can start to recognize them in what you're doing, and I think it really changes your perspective. You had mentioned earlier about kind of training and residency and stuff.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because I've been in a ton of hospitals. I don't know that I've ever seen until here, chaplain residence.
Right.
So I'm like, how does one enter this space?
Yeah. I think it looks different depending on what hospital you're at. Some of them have formal programs like we do here at Cox, where we actually have residents that they work 40 hours a week, so 30 of that is clinical, where they're in the hospital doing the work of the chaplain, and then they have 8 to 10 hours where they're doing an educational component. So they're writing case studies, and the case studies involve a lot of reflection, thinking through how was I feeling in this encounter? What do I think they were feeling? We actually write a verbatim of the encounter. What they said, what I said, what they said. And you do your best to try to remember everything,
Right.
but we do 6 of those each unit. So a unit of CPE is about 12 weeks. So it's a full year, so you'll get 4 units of CPE in this program. And we write and we reflect, we read, and then in class we're reading those case studies, we're giving critical feedback, we're asking, why on earth did you say that? Or what were you thinking?
Right.
Why didn't you address that when they said this? And you're thinking in your mind like, why didn't I? What was it that stirred something up in me that made me want to run away? Or why did I bypass when they said this and I said this? And it gives you this sense of like, I'm working on myself. A lot of the training, I think, is the process is working me and breaking me down and making me think through like, what kind of care am I giving? Because this training, I think, especially for ministers and men that have come in as pastors that have worked for as a pastor for many years, or maybe they're the sole practitioner of a church, they've kind of answered to no one, or they're kind of their own boss, and they kind of set their own schedule. And all of a sudden, they're coming into this position of learning, and people are asking all these questions of why on earth did you do this? And it's really, really difficult. But I think that breaking down process is so beneficial. I feel like every person that goes into ministry, regardless of hospital, military, hospice, or even the church, should do CPE, because it just helps you think about, like, what are my biases? Why do I think the way that I think? We are critical even of our own spiritual, religious tradition and tribe. Like, what things am I bringing into this from my own background? How am I able to meet the patient where they are, not bring whatever baggage I have to them? Because all of those things can get in the way and can impede the ability to have a really good encounter that actually benefits them spiritually.
Yeah. And I think that is a huge concept, I think, for anyone, in a patient-facing regard. Like, you always got to check yourself at the door.
Yeah.
And, it's so, I almost wish we did things like that for us. And I know in like nursing programs, I'm assuming they still do like journaling and stuff where you talk about it at the end.
Yeah.
But, even when I went through it, everyone's like,
Right.
yeah, who cares what my feelings are, kind of thing. And it's like, well, when your feelings are getting pressed and, depending on where you're at in nursing, you might have a like 90% calm, normal exposure. But, and especially you as the chaplain, you're generally not walking into like, happy day.
Not usually, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, that's such an important thing. Did you say the prerequisites for coming into that?
So for our training, I think the basic is a bachelor's degree. But once you do the CPE, which CPE is clinical pastoral education, we have 4 units of that, and that's the basic requirement for board certification. Now, to be board certified as a hospital chaplain or a military chaplain usually requires a master's degree. So the military requires a what they call a master's of divinity, and the Spiritual Care Association, which is the board certifying body that I'm part of, requires a master's degree, usually of some type of theological background. So we're master's level trained chaplains that have 4 units of CPE. And then to be board certified, there is writing, reflection. We each unit of CPE, we write to 13 competencies, competencies on how we engage in the hospital, from cultural boundaries to interdisciplinary work, all sorts of things that we write to display our competencies. So we'll write to things that we're doing in the hospital, usually kind of encounters that we're having that display our competencies. So we turn those in to the board certifying body. We usually have some type of interview process, and we also have to have post-CPE clinical hours. So we usually have to have 2,000 hours beyond CPE of working in a clinical setting before we are fully board certified. And so that's something we have to renew and update each year, kind of like any other discipline that has a certifying, body or, certification. Yeah.
How many people, might be an odd question, how many people enter into it and then they get into the process and they think, this isn't for me?
There is a handful. I've been surprised at the attrition. I feel like we've done a pretty good job, and I think that's a credit to Aaron, our CPE supervisor. He's wonderful. So I think he's able to encourage even people that are like, I don't know if I want to be a hospital chaplain, but just like stick with us. Just continue this process, and I think you'll be blessed going through this year, even if you decide at the end of it that you don't want to do hospital chaplaincy. But like I said in the beginning, I think even if you're wanting to go back into ministry or do a different vocation altogether, this work will impact you to be a better listener, a better, I think a better human.
Yeah.
Because you're reflecting on yourself and the things that you're carrying with you. Like, I think a lot of people walk through life without really being very self-reflective and thinking, oh yeah, why do I do the things that I do? And I think that just going through that process is helpful. So, each year I think, we've had a person or two that will leave the program before the end. But I think for the most part, we've had pretty good attrition keeping people in the program. So.
What is it that is there like a driving factor for those who don't stick around?
And it hasn't always been, I don't like the program.
Right.
Some of it is life circumstances. We've had some people that have had their wives have given birth during the program, some financial restraints. There have been various things like that. But I think there are, from time to time, people that come in that have a very strong view of what ministry is. And we're like, you need to halt, and we're
Right.
kind of breaking things down, and they struggle with it. They struggle with it mightily, thinking like, oh, this is a compromise of my faith because you're telling me I can't do this. So there are some that becomes the case, and I think this is year 5 or year 6 of the program. So I think Kurt, our director, and Aaron, our supervisor, I think they're getting better at the interview process, kind of maybe getting some of that feel like you're gonna maybe not be the best fit for this program. And we just have more and more people every year that are applying to come in and do this. So I think the pool of people that we're able to grab from has kind of helped with that weeding out process and getting the right people here.
Yeah.
So
My mind always runs to the worst thing in terms of, I always think of like the typical, I don't say typical in a rude way, but it's like the stereotypical nursing student that's like, I love the ICU. I want to come to the ICU. And then they come to the ICU and there's like a horrific code and they're crying and they're like, I never want to come back to the ICU. And it's like, and I guess just being in critical care for so long, that's my brain automatically shoots there. I'm like, no, there's actually more factors to it probably.
We want to expose them to as much as possible, as early as possible, because that's kind of helpful for the onboarding process. But I also recognize that I'm used to hearing the overheads and seeing the chest compressions and seeing the blood, and this person has never seen it. They're not even aware of what am I supposed to do when I go to the ER and who am I supposed to talk to when there's a death. And those are all things that I have done so many times that I'm able to be present and focus on the family and their loved ones, that I think early on it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. You're just getting wet and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So if we can get them past the first 2 weeks, I did this. I came home that first day or two and I was like, is this really what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah.
This is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's just so much. But I think once you can push through the first few weeks and just kind of get your bearings, and I think that knowing that us staff chaplains, like, we got your back, we're here for you, we're a team, we're collaborating together, I think that helps the process. But it's such a different kind of ministry. And I think a lot of pastors struggle with this ministry because they've worked in churches where they've walked with their members. And it's like, I come in and I see you, each Sunday, and then when you go to the hospital, I visit you, and then I get to visit you till you go home, and then I get to call you when you're at home, and I'm pastoring you through this whole journey. Whereas there is times where I go into a room and I visit with someone, maybe I pray, maybe I don't, and then I maybe never see them again.
Right.
And I think that that's a big adjustment for a lot of ministers who want that continuity of care, and they feel like, I just feel like, what am I even doing here? Like, am I even helpful? Is this even a helpful ministry? So you kind of have to work through some of those components of seeing it as a different type of ministry, not a pastoral ministry in church, We're being pastoral, but I'm not their pastor. They might have a pastor, and they can walk with them and they can see them at the hospital and then see them when they get home and see them at church. But that's not my role anymore.
Right.
But if that was my role at one point, that's a huge adjustment. That, again, the CPE process is kind of working through rethinking what it means to minister in a hospital setting versus a church setting.
There's so many things that come to mind. Because I wanted to at some point get into a little bit about kind of the dichotomy of like spirituality, especially looking at different healthcare providers in the role, because I think that traditionally it's like church and state. We're like, I'm your medical provider, I'm not your priest or anything. Not to say that you can't meet somebody on that level, especially if you can connect on that level. And then kind of to what you were saying about, it makes me think of learning a little bit about St. John Chrysostom a little bit, and about kind of letting go of certain things.
Yes.
And this kind of what you're talking about, the perception of self, right? And I know as a clinician, kind of to your point, I might see somebody for one day, and it might be the most horrific day of their life, and I'm going to have to kind of meet that person where they're at, ideally. In the best of worlds, when I'm in the best frame of mind, right?
Right.
I'm going to have to meet that person where they're at. I'm going to have to extend them as much empathy and compassion as I can. If it doesn't work out the way we'd like it to, then when that's over, we part ways. And I think it's hard. You spend so many days thinking about that, and like, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? Instead of just like throwing your ego in the trash, like just show up. And when it's over, it's over.
Right.
So I can imagine kind of what you're saying about.
Which I think that's probably why that reel was like, is it helpful to pray for each one? But I think that reset, I think, is helpful for, like, I might have had a great encounter just a minute ago, but I don't want to even carry that into the next room, because it might not be the same way. And if my posture is different, I just need to be like, I need to give them dignity as a person and understand, like you said, I'm seeing this person probably in the worst day of their life. And I've already seen the worst day in people's life 6 times already. But this is a different person. And I need to come in with my guard down and try to just connect with them and just be present to them.
Yeah.
That the ministry of presence is something we talk a lot about in pastoral ministry and CPE. And just being willing to be present and available to people. Real quick, there's one of the things that has always stuck out in my mind. I was early in CPE, and it was a weekend, so we only have two resident chaplains here. And so early on, you're just like, okay, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do if this happens? There was a STEMI, and I was helping a family from the ER up to the 4th floor for a cath lab procedure. They were getting a stent, and I was helping this elderly woman get to her car because she was parked way off in the ER, and she was going to drive around. I was going to meet her at the front entrance and help her up. So I get her to her car, and I'm like, okay, I got to get to the front entrance, and I'm hustling there, but I'm hearing this woman just wail. And it's like, well, I've got a job to do. I got to meet that lady up there. And I'm like, there's something that was like, no, you gotta
turn around.
This is not part of the plan. I've got to get to the front entrance. But then I'm like, okay. So I turn, and she's trying to find neurotrauma. And she said that, they're coding my brother. I don't know how to get there. And I just was like, okay, I'm going to take you. And I end up getting somewhere where I could call the other resident who was there and tell him, like, can you just meet this lady at the front entrance and get her to the 4th floor? Explained what happened. It all ended up working out, but it was what I call a divine interruption. And I always think about Jesus. He was going to heal Jairus' daughter, and he's going through this crowd, and this woman touches him, and he says, "Who touched me?" Which is crazy because there's people everywhere. But the disciples are getting frustrated. Like, there's a dying little child. This is the most important thing, and you're asking who's touching you. And he was willing to be interrupted to minister to this woman in a moment that you think, well, what's the most important thing? I have a job to do, but in the hospital, there's so much chaos. There's so many things going on, and you're constantly having to determine what's the most important thing for me to do. And I think it's like are you willing to be interrupted? Are you willing to have this moment, to see the humanness in this situation? And of course, it's not a matter of, well, one person's more important than the other. But in that moment, I was walking in the hall and I heard the cry and I was willing to stop and I was willing to help. And I think that that's kind of a very human thing for us to learn to do. I think that's probably true for medical staff as much as it is for chaplains. Like we can kind of get in our one-track mind of, I've got to visit these patients, I've got to do these things today.
Yeah.
And are we willing to be interrupted and see the need in front of us? I think that that's something that we work on a lot as chaplains.
Yeah, that is so important. You know, so many times especially when we're having like a rough day on service, right? I'm like running around and, you know, I'll see patients on the floor sometimes, and I go in and, you know, just the other day I had a lady who, you know, was known to want at least one of us, and, you know, I just popped in and I thought, oh, this is a little breathing problem. We'll tune this up real fast, you know, and it became very apparent very quickly that she needed to get some stuff off of her chest, and you know, mentally I'm like, all right, sit down, sit down, like it's time. But I think that kind of that divine interruption thing is so important in terms of I think you can create a space in your mind. There's so many times in the critical care unit where in your head you're like, I have to figure this out. I have to figure this out. I have to figure this out right now. I have to figure this out right now. And, you know, to the kind of point we talked about earlier about praying, even I've found where I kind of say a little prayer in my head, like, you know, if the answer is there and you want me to see it, give me the eyes to see it. It's not always me. It's not always my big brain. Like, I wouldn't have like, you gave me the big brain, you know, so if you want me to find the answer, then, you know, then, and if the outcome is not what we want it to be, you know, give us peace for that. But, you know, that hall on neurotrauma is like notorious for the divine interruption, as you call it, because the amount of times I have been, you know, I'm on my way to do something.
Yes.
And somebody, sir?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Let me walk you there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're mentioning the dichotomy between kind of spirituality and medical care. I think we're in a place where people are at least willing to recognize that there's correlation, and I think from a 30,000 foot view, the hospital I think is starting to see that. I think that's probably why they're willing to hire 8 residents and have this residency program, because I think they're seeing correlations between like reduced hospital like length of stays with spiritual care. I think they're seeing reduced readmissions with the spiritual care that's provided. So I think that they're seeing some of those components. How all that works to me is probably still a mystery. But faith is a key component for so many people. And I think recognizing that when we come in and we recognize their faith, or we connect them with their faith community, or even if it isn't faith community, if they're not of faith, but they have relational support, community support, getting them connected to that and feeling not isolated, which was a huge part of the struggle with COVID, is people felt so isolated. And that was a major disruption that I think we're still feeling the effects of. But I think when we connect people with their spiritual community, or just their family, helping them with that, I think the medical side is starting to see the benefit of that. Of like, there's something that's holistic about spiritual care with medical care that we can't easily separate the spiritual and the sacred, secular, whatever.
Yeah, the holistic perspective. I remember, and it's, again, serendipitous retrospectively. When I did my my bachelor's in nursing, I ended up going to a Christian college, not intentionally. Didn't know.
Yeah,
didn't know. They were advertising at our graduation and like, hey, you get a tuition discount. I'm like, that's awesome. Let's do this. And then the spirituality courses started rolling through, and I'm like, wait a minute,
the bait and switch.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
But I remember them talking about that specifically. We did several kind of research projects on, how patient outcomes are better, when you can do those things. Maybe we can talk to a little bit of, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, that kind of the taboo. It's I don't want, taboo is maybe not even a good word, but sometimes it feels that way, where, people are, because you don't want to force your, views. If that option's there and you can connect that dot, great. But if the patient, the patient is sitting there and, they're too scared to say that, whether it's because of their fear perception of how they're being seen, or if, in some awful way, like if this might affect your care, as you mentioned in COVID, we saw some pretty extreme circumstances where, some people even went in so far as to request exorcisms in our unit before. And it's hard because on one hand you're like, okay, but on the other hand you're like, especially, conversations you wish you could have done better in the background. It's like, I want to understand why do you think that? And not to disprove it, but just to understand where you're coming from. And there's so many of those conversations I wish I could go back to and be like, I wonder if I could glean something really important from that. From your perspective, what advice would you have for, healthcare providers who are struggling with that dichotomy? Because some people are very private, with their spirituality and nature, and some people, it's very prominent in their lives. But then when they come into space, they're like, I gotta push this into a little box for a minute.
Right.
How do you deal with that? I know that's a huge question.
No, but it's a good question, and it's a question that I think we wrestle with in our training. How do we meet people where they are? And I think we don't rush to, can I pray for you? Although that might be a question that we get to, it's not the first question. And I think part of it is we want to ask open-ended questions that kind of allow them to open up and talk about not just their spirituality. That might be 3 or 4 questions in, but what are you anxious about and worried about right now? Like what is it that is consuming your thoughts and your emotions? There's the hierarchy of needs. I always think about that a lot for spirituality. It's like, I can't get to the existential if their back is hurting so much that they can't even hardly talk. So it's really fruitless for me to start talking about tell me about your faith when they're like writhing in pain. It's like, okay, well, maybe I need to get the nurse.
Sir, stop yelling. Stop yelling.
I need to get the nurse to help with that first. So there are certain things that we need to address before we get to the deeper level things. Because I think, like you said, some people aren't willing to open up. But there are times where I go into the room and they see me as the God man because they saw Chaplain and they're like, oh, please pray for me.
Right.
And so, okay, well, we can go right there. And then maybe on the back end, I just go in reverse and I start to tease out, well, what brings you joy? What are some things that you're feeling in this moment because of your hospitalization that might be a life-changing thing moving forward? Because I think they want to, maybe they're scared to think about that, or even they're scared to talk about those things with their family because it's like, this is just too overwhelming to maybe talk out loud about these things. But I'm a safe person that I'm here to listen and to maybe help you process how we transition from the hospital home after something very debilitating. I work with the palliative care team. I'm one of the chaplains that works really closely with that team. So those are a lot of the conversations that we're having is like, what does life look like now that I have this diagnosis?
Right.
And does my faith help reframe the way that I'm thinking about things? We have spiritual assessment tools that we use as chaplains. FICA is one of them. It's faith, impact, community, and address. So what does your faith look like? Does that bring you peace? What impact does your faith or your faith community have on the way that you're viewing your medical care? As we were talking about earlier, sometimes the faith makes us resistant to medical care. I got to depend on God or God only.
Right.
Or maybe they're thinking God's going to heal me, or whatever happens, God is in control. And so we talk a little bit about how we're framing and thinking about the medical situation in relationship to our faith. Of course, my big thing is, do you have faith community? Do you have a pastor, or maybe they're of a different religion? We have support services that we can call as chaplains. I'm evangelical Protestant, but we have Catholic support. We have Islamic and Buddhist support. So we have people that we can call if they're of a different faith background than myself. So, and I don't pretend to think that I can give them everything that they need if I'm not of the same background. And even if I am, they have maybe that pastor, as I was saying, that can come into the hospital and be with them in the hospital and then out of the hospital. And that's a better thing for them than me to just say, no, I can take care of this all by myself.
Just stay home. I got this.
Right. Yeah. It's better for me to connect them so that they can have that continuity of care. So that's a lot of times what I'm doing is like, do you have a faith community? Tell me about that. Is that something really important to you? So that community is the C. And then how do I address this? Am I communicating? Or is there follow-up visits? Are there things that I feel like, no, that they need more continuity of care? Maybe they don't have anyone, and it's like, okay, well, we need to, as a chaplain team, we have a consult list that we are on Cerner. So we have the digital component where we're able to chart, and so we're able to get their records and chart in there, like the medical team. We're part of the interdisciplinary team. Right. So nurses are able to see what we're writing, and doctors, and so is our team. So we're able to continue continuity of care. So that's a lot of what we do. Is it's just really trying to meet them where they are, and kind of check my feelings at the door. I'm not coming in the room trying to save them. I'm not proselytizing. And that's sometimes a difficult thing for especially evangelical pastors that are coming into CPE thinking, well, this is my goal in life. Right. And what I try to do, instead of squashing that completely, because it's hard to squash that when it's like, no, are you telling me that I'm not supposed to tell people about Jesus? And I'm like, well, just think about it from a different perspective. It's like, are you able to show the love of Christ without saying Jesus? I think you can. I think that I can show Christ through my actions, through my presence, through meeting them where they are, not assuming that, on this day they have to make certain decisions about how they feel about Jesus. And I think that takes a certain cultural and epistemic humility to recognize that they are feeling all sorts of things in this moment. And it's not so easy as, if you die today, where do you think that where is your eternal salvation? And it's like, hell, I don't think that that's a good question anytime. That's just me. Yeah. But even if you did feel like this is the most important thing, it's like, maybe this isn't the decision that they make today, but maybe your presence helps them have a different perspective of like, maybe there's a different path or a different way of thinking that could potentially lead to decisions, but maybe not today.
Right. Not gonna catch you on your deathbed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was meaning to ask you this earlier. What does the day of a chaplain look like? I see you at rounds, but that's a small portion of your day. Right.
So with the staff, we have taken it upon ourselves to be more staff support focused. Like I said, we have a residency program, so we have 8 residents here, and they're taking care of the ER and the codes and the strokes and the deaths, and they're doing those as part of their education. So they're eventually the group here, this is their last week. They're not going to be going to any more ERs or codes or deaths unless they get hired here or somewhere else. And then we're going to have a new batch of residents that are coming in, and we're going to train them to run in the hospital. So we go to every STEMI, every death, every stroke, every trauma. anything overhead with the rapid response team. Anytime there's a code blue, we will go and visit with comfort care patients, hospice. We have part of the electronic medical record. We have a consult list, and a nurse can consult us at admission. They're asked would they like to see a chaplain. So we'll get all of that in a consult list, and it'll tell us if they, if they want prayer, or if they're struggling with acute illness, whatever it is. We're kind of made aware of that, and we'll make a chaplain visit. We also are made aware of every time someone changes their code status. Sometimes that's, every time they come to the hospital, they tell them, no, I'm a DNR.
Right.
So it's not always this big, heavy thing, but sometimes it's a pretty major decision. Like, if my heart stops, I'm going to tell them just to let me go. So we have that as a possible trigger for us to come in and visit and check in, like, how are you feeling about things? So that's the day in the life. We'll have somebody covering the ER, we'll have somebody covering overheads, and we're all around the hospital. And then we're checking in with staff, like who needs support.
Right.
And I think from a staff chaplain perspective, I see my role as supporting the residents, but also supporting you guys. So that's part of my reason for rounding. It's like, yes, I'm there to check in on each patient and figure out kind of the dynamics if they need support. But beyond that, I'm more there just to check in with the nurses, get to know them on a first name basis, develop rapport, connect with them. And through doing that in rounds, which is a perfect way to do that because I'm connecting with an interdisciplinary team, I'm getting to know people on a first name basis, the social worker, the pharmacist, the dietitian, all the nurses, some of the NPs and doctors, the intensivists that are in there. I'm connecting with them.
Yeah.
And they're seeing me and recognizing that I'm there for them. So that I think that's part of what I see my role as. But from day to day, I mean, it's whatever the hospital's doing.
Whatever comes up.
Yeah, it's the heartbeat of the hospital, and I think we're there.
Yeah. Are we okay on time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Just want to make sure I don't want you to make you late for anything or rounds.
No.
Yeah, it's speaking. I mean, I think everybody in this ecosystem tries to be tough. Tries to really be tough, and I think even more so maybe as providers, because we've talked about this on other podcasts where people. I think there's perceptions that maybe in certain circumstances we don't care as much, and it's like no, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Because I think part of that is for us we want to have a strong face, right, for what's going on, like because it's so easy to get anxious, nervous, and fearful, and we are also anxious and nervous and fearful, But it's interesting to me. I won't name any names. There's another provider in this hospital, and I don't mean this as a bad thing, but I just thought it was very interesting. I was spending one of the days. I just happened to be with this person, and there was a patient who was, we were doing everything possible to keep them from dying, and it was probably a case where that would have, been the most appropriate, course of the alleviation of their suffering. Yeah. And this individual, very, very religious person, kind of looked at me and was like, I'm worried that I'm going to go to hell for this. Oh, man. And I was like, forgive me. I was like, oh no, what? Like, I just was like, oh, you're joking, and they looked at me and like, no, I'm worried that I'm going to go to hell for doing this. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this information, now.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah. And that was one of the kind of the first times where I felt like a literal weight just dropped on me. I'm like, oh no. And which kind of led me to think about, because I've never even considered that people might think that way,
Yeah. Right.
and, being a little bit more maybe developed now, I can maybe see those things, understand them a little bit. It just leads me down this kind of the road of the personal grief of like a healthcare provider, because there's a lot that happens behind the curtain, but I know how many of these people, once they're out of the public eye or the public view, then, that's when the prayers start or the discussions start, or, being able to talk with some form of advisor to help you deal with it.
Yeah.
At the provider level, would you have any advice on, especially for newer providers, like how do you deal with the grief of this job and the conflict of your spirituality, and how that may conflict with what's going on or what you're called to do?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned before we were beginning our conversation just how this job is not a forever job. And the ones that have done it for 25, 30, think about like the Marks or, something like they're the rare ones,
Right.
and there's a sense of, like I think everybody in every profession, but I think medical in particular, there's a burnout component. And I think part of the reason why the hospital has been pushing chaplaincy so much is because I think they recognize like you need a person to talk to. And there might be a component, like you said, like we want to have that tough facade. And I'm afraid if I show something to my floor nurse or my nurse manager, like, is that going to go on my permanent record? Or are they going to kind of think, well, they can't handle it, and you want to just prove yourself. So who do you talk to? And so we're thinking, well, maybe as we develop rapport, there's a sense where the chaplains can be that space for you to process. And I mean, the only thing I'm charting is when I'm doing a patient encounter. So visiting with staff, there's no paper trail. I'm not saying like, well, Ron is really struggling today. None of that is happening.
Right.
And so just trying to communicate like, we're there for you. But I think ultimately early on, finding those mentors, those mentors that you can talk to that have done the work and have kind of gone through some of those like hiccups and painful experiences, that you can say like, I've had this experience, what do I do? And if faith is a really important component for the medical provider, I think really leaning into that, going, finding that church community, and just being able to find people that they can talk to and process a lot of this. I did this when I was ministering up in Wisconsin. I found a spiritual director, and it's different than a counselor who's giving me advice. A lot of times he didn't really advise me. He was just listening and asking open-ended questions. He was actually chaplaining me, He was just giving me like a place to just process things and debrief. Us chaplains were also trained in CISM, which is critical incident stress management. So we come in when there's a major incident, like, a staff member dies or a baby or something that's just not supposed to happen, and it's really heavy, but the work has to continue. And it's like you stuff those things, and eventually you stuff enough of that, it's going to start billowing out. I think all of us have had those moments of like, I've reacted in a certain way in a patient encounter. I'm like, what the heck was that? Where did that even come from?
Right.
Why am I feeling so emotional about this? And it's like, oh yeah, it's because 15 encounters I've dealt with all of these heavy things, and it's finally coming out. So the CISM, the critical incident stress management, is us kind of debriefing with staff. So we'll sit down with those who are involved with a very stressful situation, and it's not a problem solving time. We're not like, what could do better, what are the best practices?
Right.
That might be a conversation for another time, but this is like, tell me how you're feeling when this happened.
Right.
And it's like, it's amazing what will happen. Like, some people just start weeping, and it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know that was inside of me.
Yeah.
But those are the things I think we need to prioritize more as a system, to say like, no, we need to allow people to remember that they're human and that we're seeing a lot of things that aren't normal all the time. And it's heavy and it builds up. And if we're not finding ways to debrief and to decompress in healthy ways, because there are a lot of unhealthy things that we can do to stuff our emotions, you know? And so those are things that we did a lot in CPE. CPE probably should be for everybody. We talked, that was part of our unit goals. We had a medical, like a professional goal and then a personal goal. And a lot of times the professional was like learning something in the hospital, but the personal goal was like, I need to get to the gym more because I'm not prioritizing my health, or I need to take walks in nature, you know, each weekend just to kind of see green things and see outside.
Be intentional.
Yeah. I remember one time I was in the hospital and I came outside after the end of the day and there was snow on the ground. I was like, it snowed. What? You know, because you could be in this hospital and not have a clue what's going on outside.
Yes.
So I think just having those like built in, like I need normalcy and health is such a huge thing for the early on medical student. Because I mean, I think medical school in general is like built for like chaos and like late nights and early mornings and sleeplessness. And it's like it's built into the DNA of what you guys do. And it's like
it's part of the process.
It is part of the process.
Because it's like, you know, you have to function under any circumstance.
Yeah.
No, you've seen our office. I guess it used to be your office.
Yeah, that's right.
But like, there's no windows in there.
Yeah,
and
I know.
When busy days, I walk outside. I'm like, oh, the sun is still up.
Oh,
like, I haven't been in there for 20 hours.
Yeah.
I think of one of the other things I think of, kind of while you're talking, is I remember long time ago I did a short contract where I did medical psychiatric nursing.
Oh man,
which was like the funnest like 6 months of my life. Like it was so interesting. But I learned a ton. I'd never worked with psychiatric providers, psychologists, psychiatrists, things like that. And I remember going through like this basic training, and part of their de-escalation was, you know, when you're dealing with someone who's agitated, they would saying something to the effect of, I can see that you're upset. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah.
And I remember when I learned that, I was like, that's so stupid. Why would I say that to somebody who's agitated? I would be pissed off if you asked me that. You
Calm
know what I
down.
mean?
Yeah.
And our kind of head psychiatrist was just this brilliant and kind man. He seemed like a Jedi when he was talking to somebody, because you're like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know how you're de-escalating the situation, but it's working. But he, you know, even he was like, just try it, right? Like, just try it. And it works like a charm.
It does. Because
it makes a lot of people just feel seen. And I'll even, you know, on top of that, I'll stack one more thing on there. This is, you know, I think good life advice. It's also great marriage advice. Anybody who needs some of that. There was this interview that I was watching, and one of the things that had come up was this idea of kind of being intentional with your speech. And when you see something, or like when you feel something, say it. Yeah. And in this context, it was about like, if you are looking at your wife and you feel like, I love my wife, tell her that you love her.
Yes.
Right. And translationally, what I found, and especially when I have gotten to work with people who are exceptional with dealing with families and talking to people, it's never it's never a flashy trick. It's being honest. It's being very direct. It's, hey, and even so much in to say, I'm scared. I'm scared that this person is going to die. And I don't want, and I don't want that, but I think that's where we're going. Yeah. And I, don't think that there's anything we can do about it. And because in my mind, historically, it would have been like, why would I say that? Right. Why would I admit defeat or show weakness?
Well, leaning into the pain is a huge part of what I think we're called to do, especially as chaplains. And so if I see someone crying, I think maybe early on there was like, they're sad. I don't really want to make them more sad.
Right.
But now I'll ask, like, I see that you're crying. Can you tell me about what's really got you upset? You know, and maybe it's obvious, like, oh, and they'll look at me like, duh, I'm in, you know, it's like when you go in and say, how are you doing? Like, I'm in the hospital. What do you think? You know, it's like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't ask that question.
Right.
But I think asking those questions of like, well, tell me what's going on behind the emotions. It's allowing them to have that space to just open up. A lot can happen in those moments.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably attest to this quite a bit. I always tell people never underestimate the power of silence. Like, just, I know it is so wildly uncomfortable sometimes, especially if you're not used to it.
Yes.
Like when somebody says something that's really heavy or hard, like, give them space, give them time. You don't need to give them an answer to the problem. I remember, I've told this story before, when I was my first year as an RN, I was working nights, and I was dealing with this individual who had some, I think it was, I don't remember the specifics, but it was a cancer, kind of situation. And I'm as green as you can be. I have no coping skills in life. I'm still very young, I have a lot of my own issues. And it was like 3 a.m, and this person's like, they're debating whether to get treatment or not. And they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, so I sat there for a minute, and it was one of those moments where I don't know where the words came from. I don't even know that they're sensical, but I just looked at them and I said, whether you choose to or you choose not to, it's the right choice. And just
Yoda. Yeah.
And thank you so much. And I was like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. It's what they needed to hear, though.
Yeah. But, you don't have to fix every problem, right?
Some of the worst ones are like child death.
Oh, my God.
And I would say that I can tell how exhausted I am at the end of those. And I have said very little, and intentionally so. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's like the pastors that are coming in and they're wanting to like answer every rhetorical question, like, why is God doing this? And it's like, and I'm hearing them say, well, God's not, I'm like, I'm always like, quiet.
Why is God so cruel?
Yeah. And it's just like, they're crying out in pain and in anguish, and recognizing that opportunity just to let them have this moment, this space. In the Bible, there's a story about Job who has everything taken from him, and he has these friends, and they sit with him in silence for 7 days. And when they start to mess up is when they talk. Then they're starting to like, well, maybe there was sin in your life, or maybe this is why this happened. And it's like, no, shut up, be quiet. Like, you just need to sit with the weight of the grief, because there are no words that are going to fix this situation. And I've had times where at the end, the dad will just come up and hug me and be like, you've been so helpful. And I'm thinking like, I don't think I did a single thing.
Yeah.
But what was needed was someone to just bring him a chair and sit with them, or give him some tissues, or give him a cup of cold water, and just put a hand on him. Because there's nothing I can say. And that silence is very uncomfortable because we want to like fill it.
Yes.
But sometimes the silence is actually the space that they need to just feel okay to grieve.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to offer people as chaplains is, we're not going to try to fix this or explain this away. I don't have any theology that explains why a 13-year-old dies.
No.
I don't have anything for you, but I will offer my presence, and I will grieve with you.
Yeah. It's like one of those things, but my mind can't comprehend the purpose of this. I mean, I'm comforted by the fact that I know that there's always purpose.
Yeah.
But, I obviously can't give you comfort,
Right.
I was reading Bishop Robert Barron's Introduction to Prayer, and there was a story in there about an individual whose family member was in the hospital undergoing a long, hard fight, like cancer, and this person's in the hospital day in, day out for months trying to support their family, doing that thing. And then one day they finally snap, and they're, out in the front lobby of the hospital. There's like a statue of some saint out there, and they're throwing things at it and yelling and stuff. And the chaplain's there, And somebody says, why aren't you doing anything? And he says, well, they're praying,
Yeah.
you know?
We are doing something.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, allowing him to grieve.
It doesn't always look like what you
doesn't
think
look
it should
like it,
look like, you know? You can't always quell the fire. You're not always going to have, you know, the extinguisher. Sometimes it's just the presence. And like you said, right, sometimes that'll, I don't want to say it'll exhaust you deeply, you know?
Yeah.
But,
I think
yeah.
the unexpected painful deaths are, and I'm not saying anything, but I go home feeling so wiped out. Just sitting with their grief, like kind of holding it in that tension in that moment.
Yeah. I also tell people all the time, like, not everything's going to hit you the same way, right?
Right.
I mean, especially you're going to see 1,000 terrible situations, you know, all the time. And you can see a ton of very unfortunate situations, and you're like, yes, that's sad. You know, it is sad.
Yeah. I was just asking my supervisor about just kind of the numbers, and he said that we have 35,000 patient encounters a year as chaplains. So all of the residents, all of the staff, like we've encountered 35,000. That's not including family members in the hall or staff. But I mean, that we're seeing a lot of stuff day in and day out, and some of it's very, very, very heavy.
That's as much as some services see.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're everywhere.
Yeah. And kind of, you know, to your point earlier about the self-awareness component, like you are going to run into those situations where your knees are going to get taken out and you're not going to understand what's happening. You know, why do I feel this way? What's going on? You know, I've never told the story. I won't go into it. We don't have all the time in the world. We have things to do. But my burnout story, I had no idea for like 6 months. That's what was going on inside of me until one day I just was like, I don't know if it just dawned on me where I was like, oh, and then I didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Right. But, so we talked a lot about, you know, what your day's like, how do you get here, all these things. Is there any kind of final wisdom that you want to impart?
Just those who are watching, if you work here at the hospital, we're here for you. It's not just for patients and their loved ones. Of course, we're there for them, of course. But we want to make ourselves available for nurses, providers, EVS, anyone that's working here in this hospital. We also are involved at the other campuses. We have chaplains up at North. We have there at Monette, even at Barton County. And I go down to Branson a couple times a week, so we have chaplain support there. So we got our hands involved in so many different places in this whole system. So we want to make ourselves available in any way that we can.
Yeah, it's, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. There's such a synergy in what we do, especially when we work, you know, well together. And we, you know, I remember one of the codes that I was at, I think it was like the middle of the night. Someone was like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's a chaplain." What are they doing? They're doing what they do.
Yeah.
Like
showing up.
To me, it's no different than if I'm having to intubate somebody. Like, I don't have to ask somebody to connect the inbu bag, right? Like the RT's right there.
That's right.
I don't have, like, you know, my physician's right here. I don't have to ask them usually to take my stylet out. We're all kind of doing our things. We all work in unison with each other.
You may or may not need labs, but they're going to show up.
They're going to be there.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the way it is with codes and rapids. It's like there's no family there, but I'm saying, hey, if family does show up, we're here. Let us know. I just making my presence know that this is we're here to offer our support.
Well, and it's such a huge gap to bridge. I won't run super far down it, but you know, the amount of times that we get pulled into you know, a situation that likely won't end well, and then thank God the chaplain's there, because then I can go, well, what's the situation, and they're going to tell me like everything I need to know to interface with that person appropriately, because it never works well when we just hard charge into the situation and we're like, don't need to know, I'll tell them I'll tell them what's up, you know, and it's like, no, I understand how delicate the situation is. So thank you for coming on here.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's you had made a comment the other day about, oh, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'm like, no, I'm really excited about this, you know.
Yeah.
And because as we've gone through this, obviously this podcast started in a very educational format, and it still is educational. But being able to connect, you know, all these people here who, you know, people who are like, oh yeah, I've seen him around all the time. I have no idea what's going on, you know, or
Yeah.
people who've seen me all the time. Like, you know, it's so cool to hear how people's perceptions are changing and being able to see people and to build empathy, I think, for a lot of what we do, you know. And I thought about this earlier, but there's have you seen the it's the Brene Brown empathy versus sympathy. I love that.
Yeah.
Love it. It's such a concrete approach.
Yeah.
You know, just the idea of, like, as we were saying earlier, you know, if somebody says something really terrible, you know, you say, that must be really hard. You know, like
Right.
you don't have to do those things, but it's
Right.
so cool to have these conversations and
Yeah.
get some insight, and hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation
That's right.
on down the road. But if anybody wanted to learn more about, like, they're interested in being a chaplain, or maybe they're just interested in getting into ministry,
Yeah.
any recommendations for where they should go?
Yeah. You could talk to me if you want to think about chaplaincy. We field conversations, questions all the time about CPE. We have a residency program from August to August, so they're about to start. Like I said, this next week is D-Day. Day one, Monday, they're going to be in the system-wide orientation, and then next week we're going to be onboarding them. But we start our process of applications and interviews like March, April. But we have conversations with people throughout the year. So you can get a hold of me or any of the chaplains, or Kurt McLaughlin, who is our department head, or Aaron Holt, who is our CPE supervisor. We can kind of guide you in whatever way might be best for you. So, yeah.
Do you allow any, like, if someone wanted to shadow you, are they allowed to do that?
Yeah. So we'll have students that need that, or even I've had doctors that will need that for their kind of residency. Different, they need to have different departments, and we'll have them for like a half a day. They'll follow me around, and I'll kind of show them what I do, or go into a visit and do chaplain work. So yeah,
Cool.
Be happy to have somebody shadow us as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks again. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks.